Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, welcome to Open Money on Blog Talk Radio. I'm Ernie Jacob. Michael Linton is with me here in the Comox Valley, and we're talking again, as we always do, about open money, community currencies, and let systems. So, and today we're going to start off with a discussion about the Irish solution to a money problem that they had. Right, Michael? You wrote something about the Irish solution on Kashlash, which is Dave Birch's blog. Actually, no, it's not Dave. I'm sorry, no, that's not Dave Birch's blog.
That's right. Kashlash, spelled with K's, K-A-S-H, K-L-A-S-H, .net, is an interactive site that was promoted by Vodafone, one of the mobile carriers in Europe, as a site for people to discuss possible financial futures, economic change, new forms of money, changes in the social networking that we call the economy. And I've just posted a short idea up there based upon the experiences in Ireland during a bank strike in the 70s. The stories are a little vague. It's not easy to find hard data on the Irish bank sites about this sort of thing. They don't want to talk about it very much. But essentially what happened was the banks closed and nobody really cared. It was a two-phase strike, and in the early stages, people got by just writing checks to each other. They figured this was going to last a few weeks, and everybody felt pretty sort of confident that, well, you know, I'll give you a check, you can put it in the bank in 3 days or 3 weeks' time. And then, of course, the strike lasted a little longer, so people had these wallets full of checks, and they started writing them off to each other, saying, well, I've got this check here for 42 quid. If I sign this and give it to you, then it's your check, so you've got the 42 quid. And that way, the endorsed checks started to have a life of their own. When the banks reopened, of course, everybody had to make sure that the checks that they had in their wallet were good. You couldn't afford to be the last person in the chain and find that the man with the pen had more enthusiasm than money, and your check would be bad. So as soon as the banks were open, everybody ran back to the bank and deposited the checks. Now, the next thing was even more interesting, though, and that is that the strike restarted, and this time the checks began to circulate in denominated values. It was understood that money would be moved around in this way for some time. So if I was going to pay you 87 quid for something, I might give you one check for 50 and 3 for 10 and 7 quid in cash. And that way you had a £50 note, you had a 3 £10 notes of a form that were these signed promises to pay. A bank check is a legal document, and it's actionable. It's a criminal offense to issue a bank check that doesn't have funds to cover it. So a lot of care had to go into people's balancing that up, but basically people took that in their stride, and these pound bills began to become the core of the entire economy. And indeed, for, I believe, something like 7 or 8 months, the Irish economy ran entirely on these notes that were issued principally by substantial local businesses. And finally, by the breweries were the ones that really fixed the package, I'm told, because, well, you knew this, the pubs would take these bills because they would go back into beer supplies. So with the distribution of these pieces of paper denominated by the businesses in convenient scales, and with the confidence that people had in the local employer, particularly the local brewer, the money just ran round and round and round. And it did move quickly. Nobody was thinking, I have a check from my neighbor, I'll put it in a safety deposit box and keep it under my bed for the next 2 years. There was no feeling of confidence in that level, the store of value. The confidence was in this money as a means of exchange and move it quickly. So rather than saving these checks, people spent them. So you had a high velocity economy with a high propensity for people to spend locally and shop locally and circulate locally. And it was a lot of fun. Ran for, as I say, I believe about 7 or 8 months.
Michael, do you know whether those denominated checks were used for anything other than exchange? I'm thinking in terms of like loans and investments.
I don't think so, no. I mean, I don't know. My own information about this is pretty sketchy. It came from a conversation that I began at a meeting in Dublin in '93. I asked the room whether they knew anything about this bank strike that I'd heard a bit about, and everybody talked about it rapidly for the next 15 minutes. It was a lot of fun, a lot of expression of, warm nostalgic memory. Best year they'd had in ages. Long ongoing party as far as they could tell. But it was...
Yeah, with the breweries taking it, no doubt.
Yeah, it was party time. So, but it was about turnover and short, easy liquidity. I can't see that they could have used that method with any real confidence, particularly because there was no knowledge about when the banks were going to be back open or whatever. So I would think it would be strictly means of exchange money. I could be wrong, but who knows? Anyway, that was then, and it was a model that proved its effectiveness as a short-term expedient when the banks were closed, and equally proved its fragility when the banks reopened, because everybody had to jump out of the swimming pool. They'd just let the sharks and the piranhas back in. So it was an instructive lesson. It showed that under some circumstances, the trust that people have in local business and their word on their check, and of course the legal consequences of having a fraudulent check, the belief was that those were strong enough, and so it proved, and everything worked very well. Well, our proposition is that the same essential concept, the issuing of promises by local businesses, can, with some clear and specific modifications, be a very effective way of starting a community currency model for Commonwealth, for the benefit of the community in any city, region, village, wherever you are. Now, the first of the 3 changes, and we have to change a little bit about what the money is, a little bit about what it does, and a little bit about what it comes from, its state of origin. Those are 3 pretty primary characteristics of anything, be it a house, a table, or a religious cult. You know, what is it? What does it do? And where is it from? If you get those things handled, you know a fair bit. So with regard to the Irish paper money and the upgrading to something real and substantial, by which I mean virtual and community-based, the first thing we change is what the money is. And we change it from being tied to a hard cash reserve in the bank with all the stress and legalisms and risks and exclusive nature of that. We turn it from being tied to that money to being an independent issue by the business, providing a promise of their future supply of their goods or services. If it was a bookstore, it could be equivalent to just publishing gift certificates, book tokens, and shipping them out to people. By the issuance of that book token, they are undertaking to sell you a book in terms as agreed in the future. So it's a promise made out into the community. And any business is in a position, if it's substantial, persistent, secure, legitimate business, to make such promises regarding some degree of its short-term future. Now, the level we're talking about is at about...
Before you go on, Michael, the idea of substantial, I think we need to be clear that substantial doesn't mean 10 or 20 employees. It can be a one-person business.
Oh, yes. Yeah. By substance, I think I was using the deeper meaning of the word, that it's sort of real and tangible and significant. And, of course, that can be a one-person business. It can be a part-time business. It can be totally substantial. 20 hours a week, I do this, that, and the other. Maybe I'm a photographer. Maybe I'm an importer-exporter. I'm a small business, and it's substantial if it's real. If I am expecting to be there for the next 6 months, 2 years, then it's a legitimate thing for me to do, to issue a degree of promise regarding my ability to provide services during that period. Now, not off the scale. I mean, if I'm a small business of one person, I shouldn't issue about $1 million worth of expected incomes. I promise to provide $1 million worth of my services over the next year. Completely ridiculous. But to be able to promise something in the region of $1,000 of my skills and services over the next couple of years, that's perfectly feasible per person, per business. So a solo business, $1,000. Business of 20 people, $20,000. Why not? It's not a lot of money. Tiny fraction of what they pass through in terms of hard cash. So as a way of opening the door and making that monetary issue, and it is a monetary issue, but making it independent of direct access to hard cash, making it a promise to provide services is a legitimate and effective direction. So that's the first thing that we shift, is don't bet on the hard cash. Use it as a measure, but issue your promises for your services. I will provide. And if a whole cluster of businesses do that, then they have a jointly issued supportive network where their own liability in that is limited to what they have made a promise for, 1,000, 10,000, or whatever. But they're not liable for other people's promises. They're only liable for their own. And at any time they can complete their redemption of the money they've issued, get their account back to zero from the sort of the minus 5,000 or wherever it stood, and then they are complete. They have no further obligation. So it's independent of others, and it's independent of hard cash.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to see this, I mean, we've called this Community Way, what Michael has just described, essentially, and can be found at openmoney.org/CW. If anybody wants to see the slideshow of how this process develops, it's up on that site. That's openmoney.org/CW. And if anybody wants to call in and ask questions or comment or join in the conversation, the phone number is free for Blog Talk Radio in the US of A, and that's 646-716-9424, and it's up on the blogtalkradio.com website. And we're Open Money on Blog Talk Radio. I'm Ernie Jacob, he's Michael Linton, and now we're going to continue with the second bit of the transformation that's needed. Over to you.
Yes, the original Irish money of these countersigned checks, that was the pound all the way through. That is, each one of those checks was worth its face value, and it was ultimately redeemable for full cash value someplace, sometime when the banks reopened. So it could be accepted for a total price. So if I wanted to buy a table full of my friends, buy them a dinner or a beer or whatever like that, and I put down these checks, then the supplier, the restaurant, the pub, was perfectly happy to take the whole deal. Now, that's not as appropriate a model as we need to protect this model against cash loss for the businesses. I'll explain. If I'm running a restaurant and I issue promises for $20,000 of restaurant time, and somebody comes in with $50 of this money and puts it down, and I provide a $50 meal, well, maybe $25 of that meal was my value-added profit margin, whatever you like to call it, the markup on the cost of the food that I pulled out of the freezer, that I got shipped from the wholesaler, that came from Chile or Afghanistan or wherever. Don't think it'd come from Afghanistan, but a pile of food went through the system and cost my business hard cash. I cannot afford to make my cross-the-counter sales cover that cost from this new local money. It can cover the markup and the profit side and the value added, but it can't cover the hard cash costs of the sales taxes, perhaps income taxes consequent upon this. So when somebody says, my business will accept $20,000 worth of these promissory notes I've issued, they also get to say at 50% of the retail price. If I'm a restaurant, or if I'm a supermarket, I might say at 20% of the retail. So that the person who uses these monies in my grocery store is paying hard cash for 80% of the tab, 20% in the local money. That way they're happy because they've managed to keep some cash out of that loop. That's good for their pocketbook. I'm happy because I've been fully paid for my sale, and 80% of that was paid in cash, which is what I need to restock the shelves. The other 20% is in this local value-added currency, which I can then disperse as a bonus to my staff, apply to local purchasing, apply to upkeep of my business, perhaps repainting the business, perhaps just donating right back into the loop for the community. Move the money back into...
Well, buying artwork for your business or hiring musicians to play in, in your restaurant. There's all kinds of uses for a community currency that's backed by business.
Absolutely. Yeah, all sorts of options, and flexibility is a critical value in here. There have been some of these pseudo money models around that say our dollar is worth exact dollar and therefore can be spent right across. But that really pushes most of the retailers who are doing that sort of business into having to return the local so-called dollar, the Burke, the Tot, the Lewis pound, whatever these things are, to cash them in to get cash back so that they can meet their inventory costs. So it's a bit of a fantasy to think that you can create a money which will cover the whole tab. It's far more productive to think in terms of part of this and part of that, part cash, part local. And that makes the local hugely more flexible and effective.
Well, but also on the other end, not to trivialize it either, as is done with some community currencies, and they tend to be the ones that give them funny names.
And there's a lot of lightweight stuff.
The business is doing it basically as a discount rather than looking at it in terms of real money.
Yes, it's very easy to trivialize this and think of it as like another shopping point, an air mile, worth a few percent of what you're doing if you can go to the trouble of redeeming it. Club Z points in Canada, things like that. They're all real, but they're a lot of time and trouble and tedious. And to the extent that they're used by the business community, it tends to be at the level of, a discount trade-off, a 10% reduction in price rather than something that is maybe working at the 30 or 40% level and isn't a reduction in price, but it is a payment that is received by the retailer. When they discount, they're just taking a piece of paper of some sort, or a coupon, or one of these shop local charity coupon books where everything gives you a 2-for-1 at this restaurant or whatever. Those discounts are trivialized by the receivers. They can't be passed on as valuable asset by the businesses and used to amplify staff or improve stock or whatever. They're useless. And so it's imperative that you have a substantial, a respecting of the money by the businesses that are initially the issuers of it. They take it seriously, and it can be taken seriously. So we like big bites, not little ones. We're not playing 5, 10%ers on this. Well, maybe a gas station could do a 10% model because that's our margins that they've got to play with. But groceries, 20%, Main Street retail, 30, 40%, restaurants, 50%, service functions higher, massage, health, consultancy, advertising, accountancy, legals. All those can be better than 50% in the community currency. And there are times
in fact, that has proven to be the case, at least with businesses. When we did this in the Comox Valley, the businesses had absolutely no difficulty accepting the rates that we were proposing, which were basically 1,000 community way dollars per full-time worker in the business. So a 5-person business would donate 5,000 of these community way dollars, and they agreed to accept them at those rates. Like the grocery stores did 20%, and the retailers did 40%, and the restaurants did 50%. And nobody balked at the rates.
Yeah, people, when they're given a clear proposition, the easiest thing to do is to work with the clarity of it, and that's what we found. No big problems accepting these ideas when they were presented clearly. Businesses were willing to do it, and people were willing to buy the money from the non-profits who were the beneficiaries of the initiative. The businesses make donations to a bunch of non-profits, community groups to get the ball rolling. And people are happy to buy this if they know that it works for 30% in this store and 20 in that and 50 in that restaurant. That's clear. That's manageable. People can go forward with it. And that takes me to the third aspect of the change on the Irish, which is that in the Irish condition, since the money that they were playing with was essentially legal tender and claim on legal tender, they could make payments to their employees in these checks, denominated checks, and it was perfectly legitimate and legal in accordance with employment acts and whatever. However, it's not in accordance with employment acts that I pay my staff in essentially coupons on my business. That contravenes serious labor regulations over the last N 100 years. In Britain, it goes back about 500-600 years, the Truck Acts and the opposition to being paid by the company and spending your money in the company store. So you can't do with a local new creation of money by this model. You can't do what the Irish did with hard money in their checking system and use it to pay staff. Now, you can use this sort of money to reward, for instance, the owners of a business who are not bound by these similar regulations. So, you know, if the local money's flowing around the businesses, it's perfectly acceptable for the owner of the business to pay himself in that money, leaving cash in the business and being able to use this local stuff to support his personal economy, household expenses, car repairs, haircuts, whatever. But it can't go to the staff right away. So as a method for getting this stuff to kick into effect and be powerful, our advocacy is that you start with community well-being as your objective. You choose some single or multiple key objectives. In our community, homelessness looks like being a pretty central issue. So maybe homelessness would be it. Maybe it'd be food security. Maybe it would be environmental issues. Maybe it'd be social justice. Maybe it'd be women's issues, whatever. But you pick something that gives you a bit of a front, a presentation, a focus. Yeah.
But and then you say, well, by the same token, it doesn't eliminate the others either. I mean, this is an open field, and
absolutely.
And businesses choose who they give their money to, their community money.
Which is the first act, the act of contributing. It's essentially saying, my staff want to be part of the community. They want to be seen as contributing. We'd all like to turn out for, I don't know, the barn raising or help build the new swimming pool, but that would be absurd. My staff, maybe they're hairdressers, maybe they're waiters, they don't want to dig holes and be supportive in that way. But by donating their time through this contribution site, I can, as a staff member of my grocery store, be contributing to the upgrade of the school or something. Because the money that my business donates to the school, the community money, when people buy that from the schools and come back to my store to spend it, essentially my time is contributing to the upgrading of the school or the building of the shelter for the homeless or whatever the projects are. So this is a bit like, the Body Shop in Britain became quite famous for committing a proportion of its weekly staff time to good works. And then on Friday afternoons, staff would go off to work in this non-profit to help in that streets initiative or whatever. A very worthy, well-supported, paid contribution by the owners of the Body Shop to allow their staff to be participants in the community at large. A good idea in many respects, but quite inconvenient in others. For a start, it meant that on Friday afternoons the Body Shop was understaffed, and it meant that on Friday afternoons all sorts of places had some short-term occasionals coming in to help out, which isn't always all that helpful. It would be rather better if the project that needed help had a budget that they could spend to have steady, organized, consistent help. So we're taking the Body Shop model of my staff contribute and expanding it into a much more diverse and productive model where my staff can contribute to many things, but not necessarily by going in and doing the hard on-the-ground work. They contribute to it by a financial link. They make the money available for the non-profits, the charities, the causes, and they honor that money by the service they provide in their normal working situation. Now, this is pretty critical towards the whole ethic of opening open money. You've got to respect the medium into which you're projecting yourself. If you're trying to build an airplane, don't build it like a boat. Build it like a plane. You're in the air, not the water. And here, a business has to distinguish between its usual approach to the community, which is, here's a market, what can I make from it? And look rather at, here is a community of interaction, what do I bring to it? And by opening their participation in the open money world with a donation, with a contribution, with an overt act of support, a business strengthens its moral position, its functional position, its ethical position very nicely.
It's expressing its corporate social responsibility.
Indeed, which is pretty important when you think about it, that the corporation, even a small business, is supposed in law to be a person or equivalent to a person. But let's be clear about it. A corporation is not a person. It's an avatar. It's a collection of ideas, a collaboration, a form of collective intelligence, if you like. But it isn't a thing. It isn't a person. And corporations can come and go because the people involved are active, and then the people involved are no longer involved, and the corporation's gone. Well, what about its responsibilities? What are its obligations in the community? And we feel that it's an act of legitimation for a small business to declare its intent in the community by its gift to the commonwealth of that community, by entering this model with a donation of their time and energy to legitimize their presence. This will be particularly true when we look at the international application of Community Way, where you have perhaps a big European or North American or Japanese multinational is engaging in, say, an economy in Southeast Asia or in Africa, and is attempting to bring some degree of corporate social responsibility and action to some villages in Zambia or somewhere. Well, they better be coming in with gifts, with contribution. They cannot, under any circumstances, be seen just to be doing business as usual. We're here for the money. We are here to capitalize your economy so that we can exploit it. We're here to monetize the poor so that we can make more profits. All those simplistic models are simply disgusting in this context. They will not fly. If a corporation wants to benefit and create benefit, it does start by giving. And once it's given, it can learn the value of recirculating that gift in this local economy. Very substantial profits, benefits to all concerned, but start the right side up, because if you're looking at this as pure take, it will not work for you in the same way.
Well, that's, all right. So those are the three transformative bits in terms of the Irish solution to the money problem. Mm-hmm. What about the mechanics of this? What's underneath it? How does this thing work?
Well, there must be some sort of equivalent to the coin, the bill, the check, the credit transfer between accounts. A payment must be cleared when I go to the grocery store or the restaurant. After I've taken delivery of whatever it is, there must be some clear satisfaction to the business that credit has been applied to their account, that the sales taxes on this process are applicable and whatever. So what's the mechanism? Now, ultimately, initially the mechanism starts at the account level. The whole value of opening open money accounts is to provide flexibility, facility, and multiplicity to its users. Whether they see that in the first place or not, the idea that they can extend from this first initiative in Community Way to other transactions, other currencies, other models, other networks, some local, some of them non-local, perhaps global. The account base gives that facility, and we must understand as developers that our reason for propagating the Community Way model is not just to raise cash for the community. That's good. It's not just to give businesses an understanding of what they can do with recirculating money. That's good. It's also to put the businesses and the other users of the systems in a place where they can diversify into the multiple opportunities that an open money platform makes available. And for that, there must be an account base. You can't operate simply with coins or paper bills, because a coin or a paper bill has the distinct tendency to create a singular money in your region. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't start a Community Way model with a paper bill. Well, there's an issue of denominated $1, $5, $10, $20 bills, logo of the region, some nice graphics on one side of the paper, and on the back, the name of the issuing business, perhaps a reference to the community charity or cause that it donated to. So each bill in circulation can be defined in relationship to the business that was the originator of it. This is a high-profile, high-optic, spread it around, engage people's perception. It means that the currency can be totally anonymous, that is, that people who are not linked into the system by account name, they didn't open an account in the community money system, but they'll take this piece of paper because they know they can pass this piece of paper. So a piece of paper of that nature is a good opening model, provided the security systems are strong, provided you don't spend too much money on it, because you've got to understand you cannot persist with that model. It will not scale up, because the bigger it gets, if all of a sudden you have $1 million of this money floating around, then you will have a lot of fraud, counterfeiting, all sorts of risks become deeply critical to the system. So paper is a start, and you can put around a little bit of paper to make it clear to people how this works, to give the evidence in public domain. But preferentially, you move towards a multi-currency smart chip of some sort. You know, like those cards you get in the big cities that work in the underground. They work on the buses. They may work for parking meters. You know, they're stored value. You load them up with $50 and you spend until it's down, and then you load it up again. Phones have very much the same style in so many places now. Charge off a minute.
And also, don't forget, the first community currency smart card in the world in the Comox Valley 8 years ago.
I never forget that. Oh, it was earlier than that. We were doing that in 99. 98, we organized it, designed it, negotiated it, courtesy of General Information Systems of Cambridge, gis.co.uk. Brilliant outfit, do great work, and we used their platform and their expertise to develop a multi-currency community card, stored value up to 15 independent purses on the wallet, so you could carry 15 different local currencies, all virtual, no hard money. A good security cover, triple DES certificate, for those of you who know what this means. Not uncrackable, but sufficiently secure to resist a lot of the problems that we would expect with paper. So yeah, we go towards multi-currency, and multi-currency could be a smart card, a smart chip. It could be a phone wallet. The increasing activity in the mobile industry drives us continually towards mobile carrying money. So that you can take your phone and you go past the till, and the till is saying, will you pay me $14? And you just wave your phone at it and hit the right button, and $14 is drawn from the wallet on your phone into the wallet at the till. The business is paid, you have paid, everybody's happy. That's the direction we're going. But there's cash involved in that. There's also some development still to be done to make that current and effective. So we don't want to wait until that has been completed. The value of community currencies, community way, can be realized right now with very simple paper and pencil type levels of activity.
In fact, that's our proposal. That's our proposal with a few of the young local businesses in the valley here.
Yeah, the Comox Valley has had, of course, a cyclic history of community currencies from 82, 83, when we began the first LET system, to its sort of stasis in 86, 87, to its revival in 90, to its resurgence in 93, 94, to its sort of flattening off in 95, 6, to its restart as a community way in 99. Well, we've been up and down the scale, and everybody's a little sort of confused and befuddled about it. But not the younger businesses in town, the new generation who are, who aren't tarnished with the old boy networks that perhaps think they learned something 10 years ago and believe that that's all there is to it. What the local business community here learned 10 years ago was wrong. They misunderstood. They were unable to engage with it very effectively. And I'm talking about the general business community, not the couple of dozen businesses that did get involved and found it to be legitimate and effective as far as it went. I'm talking about the 1,000 businesses that didn't. I'm talking about the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Society. I'm talking about the Rotary clubs, the service clubs, the downtown merchants of all these groups that, well, are either uninformed or ignorant or confused about this. Well, in addition to those...
Yeah, I think perhaps confused, although one would think that seeing a community currency smart card floating around your valley would have piqued some kind of curiosity with the economic development people. But, it's like, here's something actually, created right here in the Comox Valley and is unique in the whole world, but doesn't seem to register.
Well, it's people can't see what they can't see, and if they see it as, oh, this is just a local crazy idea and it's not happening anywhere else in the world, so it can't be real. And that was pretty much the level of critical analysis we got from the local leaders of economic thought in the 90s. Well, we're going back now to talk to perhaps a new generation in the Chamber of Commerce, perhaps a new generation in the Economic Development Society, certainly a new generation in the small businesses.
Well, and also an advance in understanding networks and particularly this young generation that grew up with the internet are much more comfortable. I mean, they can see what this is immediately. They don't need to have it broken down.
There's a quicker uptake and an easier understanding of the basic why not, let's do it. And so we're targeting quite an ambitious, it would be considered quite ambitious. We have an economy in our community, a total gross local domestic product, gross and local, of probably about $1 billion. Now that's based upon the average per capita income of something in the region of 20,000. That's man, woman, and child. And the number of men, women, and children in the area is about 50, 60,000. So between those figures, we come up with about $1 billion as our annual turnover that goes through the bank accounts and wage packets of the people who live here. That's our community economy. It's what goes through your pockets and my pockets over the year. And it's about $1 billion. Well, in $1 billion, it should be perfectly reasonable to expect that we can raise $1 million for community projects. In our case, perhaps homelessness is the main drive. But $1 million from $1 billion is 0.1% of the annual turnover. And in these days, when we're looking at communities taking account of themselves, being supportive of themselves, seeking to improve their responsibility of their interaction with the wider world, so we're not drawing down on resources of other communities, and we are maximizing the effectiveness of our local system, and we're not relying just on big government handouts or regional government handouts to sort out our problems. All too often politicians are just there to go home to the pork barrels and harass for benefits, preferentially to their local constituency. Well, that's an obscene process. That's politics of the least deserving level. Communities should look after themselves, and asking a community to undertake to raise 0.1% of its annual turnover on behalf of its overall well-being, well, that's hardly a huge target, but when you look at it, it's $1 million. So we're undertaking $1 million fundraiser in a small community with a small idea. And our expectation is that it won't be very difficult at all. We think we can raise $1 million. More to the point, in raising that $1 million of hard cash for our required projects in the community, we install $1 million of circulating liquidity in the community. And that circulating liquidity will produce several $1 million of economic activity over the same period. So the benefit here of raising $1 million isn't just $1 million. It could be 5, 10 million in economic benefits. And that's just the start.
And here's a question. Here's a question for any economics majors or PhDs out there, is what is the multiplier effect of a new, well, let's say $1 million new business-backed dollars circulating in the community, as long as people want this money to keep circulating within this community. What's the multiplier effect of that in comparison to the multiplier effect of the conventional dollar that flows in and out of the community?
Yeah, and that's basically not so much a question as a riddle or a paradox. It's a challenge because it's not even a really computable figure. It's with conventional money, you can compute it quite accurately, quite quickly. You drop $1 million inside a community like this, and it spins around once, and it's down to a couple of 100,000. It spins around again, it's down to 20, 30,000. It doesn't take long before the whole stuff is drained out, like water dripping out of a spin dryer of some sort. Centrifuges right away, and does it very quickly. So we can ascertain the impact of $1 million hard dollars dropped into the community and how long they stay. But what is so-called multiplier effect almost ceases to have any relevance when you're talking about a community currency that's always there, whose volume and circulation oscillates up and down according to the space in the economy for these currencies. Sometimes there'll be a lot of interest in them because the hard cash is really tight. Other times the hard cash is flowing, so the comparative interest in the local currencies will be diminished. So sometimes there'll be millions of dollars in local money out there, sometimes less, sometimes more. The multiplier, infinite, indeterminate. It sort of turns the whole question inside out and upside down, which is good. These questions need to be looked at with a damn sight more clarity. And one of the ways to do that is to challenge the so-called technical economists, the theoreticians of this money grab system, to try and explain what they think they're talking about. Now, I don't mind wasting economists' time because, frankly, I think all economists are wasting time. They're wasting our time. They're wasting all sorts of things. So putting them into a little loop spin of their own and getting them to examine their own premises is probably a good thing for all concerned. Keeps them off the streets, calms them down a little bit.
But well, the essential point is that the target of $1 million in a $1 billion economy can be the target for any community. The Vancouver regional community, which probably has a I don't know, maybe a $40 or $50 billion economy, could be raising $40 to $50 million for homelessness in Vancouver, for example, or Portland. There's a group of people in Portland who are having a look at Community Way and Open Money and are looking to get a project going there. So that's the challenge: is can you raise $1 million in a billion? And we're not talking about taking $1 million out of $1 billion.
No,
we're actually talking about adding $1 million to $1 billion. And having it go round and round and round and round.
And we're wanting to find out how quickly this can happen. In principle, it could happen in astonishingly fast. In practice, it'll take longer because it's a question of accumulating the interest of a proportion probably of the business community. And the proportion that drops out of these figures is something like 10% of the labor that's involved in the so-called market economy locally, the people who are in the buying and selling, we live or die according to our business group, not the non-profits, not the government jobs, not the schools or hospitals. Quite simply, the people who are storefronts, manufacturing, fabrication, the independent, the entrepreneurs, the small and medium-sized businesses of our community. In our world, we figure there's about 10,000 people, maybe a few more, maybe a few less. And we figure that if 1,000 of that 10,000 are involved in the community way, then we've done it. That'll do the $1 million in hard money for the nonprofits, and it'll put $1 million in soft money into circulation, and it'll have a sizable proportion of the business community showing their stuff, demonstrating their community relationship and their corporate social responsibility. So we see that as a sort of a breakthrough level that will subsequently grow through the rest of the business community at the pace that the local culture and what would you call it, business intelligence demonstrates. And some spaces are going to be a lot quicker than others.
And that business intelligence can arise anywhere. And as for instance, there could be a group of business people in Albuquerque who, one of whom's listening to this show and saying, "Whoa, this looks like a really interesting idea," gets a few of his and her buddies together, and they decide to do it. And it can be done in 6 weeks, a couple of months, getting a Community Way up and running to positive cash flow. And that's the other thing about Community Way, is that it finances itself through business registrations at the rate of 100 Community Way dollars per full-time equivalent employee. So again, a 5-person business donating $5,000 to community organizations of their choice, they pay 500 Community Way dollars to the development group that's making all of this happen. So this is a project that finances itself. Also, that's the way smart card equipment, whatever, transactors are purchased by the community so that businesses can just integrate them with their systems, their business systems, their point of sale and accounting systems. And all of that can be done very quickly and with very little money up front and positive cash flow in a couple of months.
Which is in dramatic distinction to some of the other currency initiatives, like the Berkshires, the transition towns, paper currencies, and so on, which seem to plead that they've got to be costly to achieve the intangible benefits that they claim they're achieving. It's sort of like it might cost you several $100,000 to put out something like the Berkshires have done in Massachusetts. But nobody can identify what the benefits are in any substantial way. So you take an intangible projected benefit, you set it up against hard costs at that level, and you try and make a virtue out of this. Well, our counter to that is, here's a tangible benefit, hard cash in the nonprofits, soft money, local money circulating to recordable benefits and economic development, and it pays for itself. Now, that should be a distinct differentiator between the strategies, and we would really love people to pay attention to this distinction. If you're going to create money, you should do it in a way that has economic viability. If the money that you're creating is merely a suck,
social responsibility.
Well,
because
that too.
Because the process, what we're talking about, is a corporate social responsibility and and business loyalty built into one package that is also of benefit to the community. It's a win-win-win all the way around. Nobody loses in this game.
And not just win-win-win by the individuals, but also that the Commonwealth is a win, that everybody as a group has collectively benefited from this process, whether they knew it or not. Now, that's the intrinsic distinction. If you're creating a new economy with a new money system, surely it should be self-viable. Surely everything within it should be cost recovered at least. And ours is, the others aren't. That's why open money is the way of the future, my friends, the way of the future. Well, and pretty soon it'll be the end of this broadcast. Ernie, I think we've got pretty close to the hour.
Yep, 4 minutes left. And I guess we just do a wee extra of some kind. Sing a song, do a dance. What's next on the agenda?
Well, I think the next thing on the agenda is Kashlash as a sort of a focus point for some more interesting ideas. The ideas that are propagated inside the community currency movement are pretty trivial, dire, inadequate, inconsequential, unproductive, patronizing, stupid, religious, ideological, witless. I'm not enthusiastic.
Do you want to say anything bad about them?
Let me think. So Kashlash is where the action is.
Well,
at the moment, it's one of
in terms of community currencies, open money, the discussion of these kinds of issues.
Yes, and I also think that the discussion is going to move towards Europe for a little while. North America is busy in its Obama phase, and everybody is sort of furiously believing that they can sort of pull up the drawbridge and batten down the hatches and we'll tough it through in some way. North America is once more seeing itself as an island.
Yes, now, but wait a minute. Within North America, there are people with open minds, with
I do agree.
Collective intelligence, and any one of them can pick this idea up and run with it, and actually create community way in North America anywhere, just like that. Piece of cake.
I absolutely agree, and I don't want to diminish that possibility, but I'm just speculating, pure projection and guesswork. My speculation is that things are going to happen in Europe in the next 2 or 3 months that will accelerate past the initiatives that are being considered in North America at this point.
Well, let's hope so. We've only got 1 minute remaining, so we're out of here. I'm Ernie at openmoney.org. That's Michael that's MWL at openmoney.org. And you can find us on lets.net, where that's our newest version of web presence. And BlogTalkRadio. We're going to keep doing this like on a weekly basis, like Monday morning, right? Seems to be a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe next week we'll tell people that we're going to be on and at what time, and maybe somebody else might want to join us.
Well, we're always up for conversations. So.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so we'll talk, eh?
Yes. Bye, guys.
Bye, all. We're out of here. That's Ernie and Michael, openmoney.org and lets.net. And, well, just Google Open Money. You'll find all kinds of stuff out there if you're interested. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note. And we're also on Skype. We can do Skype conversations. I'm Ernie Voice on Skype, and Michael is MWL. Are you MWL on Skype? I forget.
I'm MWLINTON on Skype. MW Linton.
Okay, but you are MWL@openmoney.org for email.
That is me. Absolutely. Yep.
And I'm
Good.
Ernie@openmoney.org. Okay. The show is on, but not streaming. Good.
We are recording, but ended. So I'm going to
Yes.
discontinue. I'm cutting out, Ernie, and
okay.
you're on your own. Bye now.
See ya.